All of us have put all our gadgets. Okay.
You are the only one who knows about it.
Where's the CEO? Is he coming? Somebody has taken. No, sir. These things are casting a shadow here. No, it's fine. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the IEC one more time. Let me take this moment to introduce the leadership of the IEC. Let me start with the chairperson of the IEC, Advocate Pensi Tlakula. Sitting next to her on the right is Vice Chairperson of the IEC, Mr. Terry Tselane. Next to him is Commissioner, who's our judge, Judge Makanya. And then coming back this way, you've got Commissioner Reverend Finger. And then next to him, you've got our Chief Electoral Officer, Musoto Miepia. Welcome to this press briefing, very important one, as we begin to cast special voting. If I may request all of us to keep our phones, please, on silence, if your phone is on. And then all the gadgets that must be lined up must please take their position, so that once we start with the press briefing, once the chairperson briefs us, we can be able to proceed with our work. And a special welcome to our observers. Welcome to our press briefing. Chairperson, let me take this moment to allow you to brief the nation on the special votes today.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Can you hear me? Is there a micro?
Yes.
This one. Should I use this one?
That one.
Is that better? Okay, thank you very much. My colleagues, members of the Commission, the Chief Electoral Officer and senior members of staff, members of political parties present here today, international and domestic observers, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the National Results Operations Center and to our first press conference for the 2014 national and provincial elections. Thank you for joining us and for your interest in the continuing democracy in our country. The Electoral Commission is confident of its readiness for the national and provincial elections on Wednesday. Everything is in place for the country's 22,263 voting stations to open on schedule at 7 a.m. on Wednesday in anticipation of the arrival of 25.39 million voters who have registered to vote in the elections. Of the 22,263 voting stations, 20,736 voting stations are located at permanent venues. 1,495 voting stations are located at temporary venues where tents will normally be required. 14,458 voting stations are located in schools. 1,591 voting stations are located in places of worship. 255 voting stations are located at tribal authority sites. 77 voting stations are located in clinics or hospitals. There are also 32 mobile voting stations required in far-flung voting districts where a vehicle moves between predetermined stopping points to meet voters. All materials have been distributed to provincial warehouses and onto local municipal secure storage facilities ready for delivery to voting stations early on Wednesday morning. Of course, the most critical element are the ballot papers. For this election, we have printed and distributed 62.8 million ballot papers, 31.4 million national ballot papers, and 31.5 million provincial ballot papers. The national ballot paper is the longest yet for an election in South Africa, containing 29 contesting parties. This is 3 more than contested the 2009 national elections. The ballot printing required in excess of 500 tons of paper. All other materials too have been distributed, including over 220,000 ballot boxes, 412,000 staff ID stickers, 83,000 banners, nearly 119,000 voting compartments, over 100,000 voting stations direction arrows, 5,214 kilometers of voting station demarcation tape, almost 60,000 stationery packs. There are 14 items in such a pack, and included in this were the following: over 580,000 pens, 116,000 rulers, 2.9 tons of string or twine, 2.9 kilometers of tape, 4.65 million sheets of note paper, 2.9 tons of rubber bands, over 58,000 permanent markers, 11.7 tons of reusable rubber putty or plastic, and almost 3 million paper clips. Security materials were handled separately from the mainstream of electoral material deliveries. These security materials included the following: nearly 120,000 security stamps to mark the ballot papers at the back, over 27,000 tamper evident tapes for sealing sensitive documents and boxes, 118,000 indelible ink pens to mark voters' fingers. Voters are reminded that their ballot papers must be stamped with a security stamp by election officials when they are issued to the voter. Unstamped ballot papers will not be counted. The certified voters' roll for these elections contain 25.39 million names. The master voters' roll, which was printed for use in the voting stations on voting day, involved the following: over 24,000 unique and separate segments of the voters' roll to include voting center substations, totaling 1.8 million pages, requiring 8.6 tons of paper. In terms of staff, we have filled 211,032 temporary positions and trained them all as voting staff. Additionally, there are 4,563 area managers that have been appointed to oversee voting activities within district areas, and a further 1,200 permanent IEC staff. That makes almost 218,000 election officials. Today's start of special votes at voting stations and home visits has provided a good system and readiness check, which has gone very well. We are expecting just under 400,000 voters to cast special votes today and tomorrow, either at their voting stations or by being visited by election officials in the case of voters who are disabled, pregnant, or ill. Special voting is taking place in all but 3,593 of the country's voting districts where no special votes had been applied for. So this provides a very good, if we can call it, dry run for Wednesday. Only some minor logistical issues were reported during the day. Among these were high winds along the eastern seaboard in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, which had blown over tents erected as temporary voting stations overnight. These had been re-erected today. Other incidents reported included the delayed opening of isolated voting stations due to delays of material deliveries, staff arrivals, and some difficulties in gaining access to premises. There were some isolated incidents of community protest action, which were reported to the security structures, and South African police services had been deployed in these areas to monitor the situation and to ensure the security of the voting process. Meanwhile, just over 12,000 marked ballots had arrived by courier from international voting stations. They are being reconciled against the list of voters who successfully notified the Chief Electoral Officer of their intention to vote outside the Republic. The ballot papers will then be set aside in ballot boxes and securely stored until local voting stations closed, and the counting of all ballot papers starts at 9 p.m. on the 7th of May. The votes from all international voting stations will be combined into a single international voting district. Further ballots are expected to arrive today and tomorrow from other international destinations. It will only be known how many voters cast their votes at international voting stations last week once counting begins, but approximately 27,000 voters are expected to vote abroad. Voting stations open for all registered voters at 7 a.m. on Wednesday and will continue until 9 p.m. at night. Registered voters should vote at the voting station where they are registered and must bring their green bar-coded ID, a valid temporary ID certificate, or a new smart ID card in order to vote. Voters can check their registration by sending their ID number by SMS to the number 32810 at the cost of R1, or calling our toll-free number 0800 11 8000. Information on voting is also available on our website, which is www.elections.org.za. Ladies and gentlemen, you can report to the people and registered voters of South Africa that we are ready to deliver yet another free and fair election, and that will do so efficiently. We are ready to make them proud again and follow in the glorious tradition of 20 years. It is now up to the voters to make their choices. We appeal to all voters to respect the rights of others, to choose a party of their choice. We appeal to political parties to respect our processes and to work with election officials and security services to ensure a peaceful and smooth election in all areas. I would like to thank all observers for their continued interest in the growth and development of democracy in our country. I would like to thank the security services for their work over the next few days and to ensure a safe and secure election. Then to the 218,000 election officials, I wish you the very best for the next few days. Thank you for your commitment, your passion, and your dedication to democracy in our country. I know that you will again live up to the highest reputation of excellence that South Africa and the world have come to expect from you. Finally, to the voters of South Africa, our future as a country is in your hands. This is your country. This is your moment. Vote and vote wisely. I thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm now going to open the floor for questions. Let's agree that you are going to introduce yourself, the name of the media house, and then pose the question. Please, let's keep it as short as possible. I'm going to take the first 3 questions, then allow the panel to respond to those various matters that are being issued. I'm going to take Malungelo and then go to Mahlatsi. And third question, let's take the 4th one. Yeah, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a mic for you behind you, Malungelo.
My name is Malungelo Boy from ENC.
Make sure that the mic is on.
My name is Malungelo Boy from ENCA. 2 organizations of representing people with disabilities are saying that their members have been overlooked. I want to find out from you whether do you feel that you've done enough to assist this section of the South African population in registering as well as in voting today and tomorrow? Thank you.
Malungelo, can you please clarify the 2 organizations you're referring to?
It's the People with Disabilities of South Africa and Ubuntu Center. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Then can we proceed to the front?
Mahlatsi Gallants from SABC. Chair, you describe as the violent torn areas as isolated, but surely the right to vote is fundamental, and the fact that some of your officials couldn't erect tents or allow for voting to take place should concern you. And what are you doing in relation to the security sector, the ministers, to ensure that at least tomorrow the special votes do go ahead in those areas, and also on Wednesday? Because there is concern that if your officials don't have access to those areas, the larger population will then be denied of this right to vote. Are you talking to them? Are you satisfied that they're doing enough?
Righty. Can you come to the front here? Thanks a lot.
Good day, everyone. My name is Johnny Sai Maromo. I'm with the South African Press Association. My question is to the chair. I wanted to check with you the issue of violence. I wanted to check how much of a concern is it nationally, and the hotspots, which are the so-called hotspots across the country. How much of an assessment have you done to know that your staff there will be safe, and also the voters? How much of a concern is it? And secondly, how much of an assessment have you done to see that whether the voters will be safe in those areas to go and vote? We are going to vote in those areas. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let me take the last one, Simone. Let's take the last question from you before we take the next round of questions.
Good day, Chair and Commissioner. Simon Heridin from Daily Sun. My question just relates to numbers. We've got 29 parties contesting the national elections. I just wanted to know what is the combined total of all parties contesting both national and provincial. Thanks.
Alrighty. Panel, may we please take respond to the 4 questions, then we'll take the next round of questions afterwards.
Okay, is this on? Hello? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's on.
People with disabilities, let me start with that question. We have tried to the best of our ability to make special arrangements for people with disabilities. And as you know, we have different types of disabilities in our nation, which will be physical, and there'll also be partially sighted people. As far as physical disability, we know that we use infrastructure in this country that has been provided to us by government. We use schools. We also use private facilities. Some of them have ramps for people who are on wheelchairs, others not. Where there are no ramps, to the best of our ability, we try to put temporary ramps to enable the physically disabled or people living with disabilities to access our voting stations. Regarding people with who are partially sighted, we have designed a special ballot paper called a universal ballot paper, which will assist people who are partially sighted to vote. We designed that ballot paper in consultation and with the assistance of people living with disabilities, because if you operate in that sector, you will know that they have a slogan that says, "Nothing for us without us." So to the best of our abilities, we have tried. It's not perfect. And I think as we go, we'll try to improve on those facilities to ensure that there is absolute accommodation of people with disabilities. I think the issue of violence, it is isolated, yes, but we have to pay special attention to that. We've always been working with the security cluster. We have made we have arrangements that we have put in place to ensure that everyone in those areas is able to exercise their right to vote. We have contingency plans, which I cannot share with you because if I share them with you, they'll stop being security plans. But we have plans in place as long as we can assure the nation that we have plans in place that we have put in, and we're working very closely, and we have been working closely with the security cluster over a period of months, and we receive briefings continuously about the situation in those areas. There are 29 parties, I think CO 45 all in all, with different numbers in different provinces. Chair, Deputy Chair and Commissioners, I don't know if you want to add.
I just want... Is it on?
Yes.
Oh. I just wanted to add on this issue related to the instances where we've got pockets of instability in our country. You may be aware that we've been working very closely with our communities in all those areas. We have established conflict resolution panels. These conflict resolution panels have been working very closely with the communities concerned with the hope of finding a solution. But in addition to that, we have been appealing to the political parties. You may be aware that also we signed code of conduct with all the political parties where political parties indicated and committed themselves that they will help the IEC to make sure that the environment within which we are going to be having these elections is such that we can have a peaceful and credible election. But apart from that, we've had peace conferences in some of the areas So we have put really in place quite a number of mechanisms and measures to make sure that all these issues are dealt with. Our first prize has always been on a negotiated settlement between the political leadership and those residents of the communities that are affected. But naturally, as the chairperson indicated, if these discussions and persuasion and conversations do not yield results, then we have an arrangement where the security cluster ministers have made a commitment that they will assist us in ensuring that nothing happens that will disrupt our operations. And we are satisfied with the kind of commitments and conversations that we have had with.
Let me take the last round of questions. Let me start with Sophie and then proceed to the gentleman here. And then, so it's 1, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Let's start here in front. Sophie, let's proceed.
Sophie Mkwena from the SABC.
All right. Check if it's on. Yeah.
1, 2, 1.
Hello?
Sophie Mkwena from the SABC. I just want to find out, this is one of the hotly contested elections. In terms of the do's and don'ts, inside and outside the polling station, particularly for political parties, can you take us through? There were reports that overseas people were taking pictures inside of the polling station, and also people at times campaigning around the polling station. Can you briefly tell us exactly what needs to happen?
It's Timbiso from SABC Digital News. I just want to know from you, Ms. Tlakula, do you think the IEC's election campaign has reached all South Africans? Do you think the IEC's election campaigns, including the ads on radio, has reached all South Africans, including the homeless? Because there are homeless people who have expressed their views that they only noted that it's election year when they saw the polls on the streets. So do you think the IEC's election campaigns have reached all South Africans, including the homeless? Thanks.
Carla Fenter, whoa, that was a lot. Carla Fenter from The Citizen. Talking about disabilities, how do you determine when and if a mentally disabled person can vote?
My name is Tando from 702. There were some reports of ballot papers that were found in some communities around South Africa, mainly Cape Town and the Free State. What is the IEC doing to ensure that the voting process is credible? And of course, what are you guys doing to investigate what happened?
All right.
Bazukile from Power FM. I would just like to ask if you can confirm or deny that there's been a polling station in Sterkspruit in the Eastern Cape that has been set alight today. And also, I'm just curious, one of my colleagues went to vote this morning for the special votes, and already her ink is rubbing off. I'm sure by tomorrow morning it will be gone. Just wondering if you could just satisfy my curiosity and explain how, if there's a, what if she slips through the cracks and votes again?
Alrighty. Let's allow the panel to deal with the questions raised. We've got 6 questions. Panel members, commissioners, CEO, if you can tackle those.
I'm going to ask Commissioner Finger to respond to Sterkspruit because it comes from that province. Okay, let's respond to some of the questions. The do's and the don'ts inside and outside the voting stations. The first thing to say is that there were reports that campaigning ended yesterday. This is not what the law provides. The law provides that no political event And by event, we're talking about organized events like marches, like rallies. No political events shall take place on voting day, which means that no political event it means campaigning can continue until midnight tomorrow, because voting day starts on the 7th. Special voting days are not defined in law as voting days. Voting day is the day proclaimed in the government gazette by the president and the 9 premiers. So political parties who want to give final push between now and midnight tomorrow can still do that. Nothing prohibits them from doing that. The do's and the don'ts, we heard that people were taking, especially young people, photos of their ballots. The law prohibits that. No one is allowed to reproduce, to take a photo, a photo of his or her marked ballot, and no one is allowed to reproduce a photo of a marked ballot. So that's not allowed in terms of the law. If young people want to post on their Facebook their photos voting, they must take those photos outside the voting station, not inside the booth. That's not allowed. We could have easily, in fact, we toyed around with the idea of taking cell phones from people before they entered the voting station, but we thought that would be too much. Where would you store those cell phones? So that's why we came up with a general regulation that says no voter is allowed to reproduce a photo of his or her marked ballot. I think it's also important to say we have heard in the past that voters are not allowed to wear T-shirts of their political parties. The law doesn't say that. I think it's only party agents who are not allowed to wear T-shirts of their voting or any other, apparel indicating their political parties. Voters can wear anything. And why we say that, it will be very difficult really to turn voters away. Can you imagine if a voter turns up with a T-shirt of a political party and then we say to them, please go back and dress properly? How many of them are we going to turn back? So we don't go there. I think the last thing to say is that the law also provides that the only activity that is allowed within the boundary of the voting station is voting. No other activity must take place within the boundary of the voting station. You will realize that when you go to our voting stations on Wednesday, you will see that political parties will have set up tables and tents next to the voting stations. They can do that provided those tables and tents do not impede the access of voters to the voting station. And voters also should not be forced to report to those tables and tents. If a voter comes and a political party asks them to come to a tent, if a voter is not inclined to do that and doesn't want to do that, that voter must be left in peace. And those tables and tents must be outside and away from the boundary of the voting station. I think I have dealt with the first question, and I will ask my colleagues to deal with others. Let me just deal with the disability one, because the mental disabled, I think here we're talking about people who have been certified and declared mentally ill through a court process. Those are the people. Of course, you can ask, how do we enforce that? Do we ask people to bring certificates? Of course, we don't. But if a person comes in a sound mind and is able to cast their votes, generally we do allow them to vote. But the law provides that those who have been declared mentally ill through a court process are not allowed to vote. Thank you.
just want to deal with one question, and that question relates to whether we've done enough as the Electoral Commission to reach to the South Africans. We're moving from an understanding that the electoral process is a joint responsibility. It's a joint responsibility between ourselves and various stakeholders. Political parties have got to play a very important role in terms of making sure that their supporters understand the electoral process and that they are ready to come on the day of the elections to cast a vote. So in terms of the kind of the discussions and training that we have had with the political parties, we are hoping that they are able to disseminate this information to the local areas, particularly to their supporters. Media also is a very important partner. We've been having conversation with yourselves at all different levels, and we're hoping that also that message is able to reach the people that it's supposed to reach. From our side as the Electoral Commission, we've done every little thing through radio, through both electronic and print media to try to reach as many South Africans as possible. But something that is even more unique this year, we went further by becoming extremely strong when it comes to social media. We've been very strong on Twitter, we've been very strong on Facebook, trying to make sure that we are using this platform to reach particularly to the younger generation. In addition to that, you saw last time when we launched this center, we launched various applications. Now these applications can be accessed either through Apple stores or Android or smartphones, and we're hoping that people have actually been able to take advantage of all these platforms that we have used to try to reach to our people. We did our bit also in terms of voter education. We are hoping that we are able to reach some of the people. Of course, it's going to be important that we continue to engage with our people, to engage with our partners, to make sure that each and every South African is able to get the message of the elections. But it is a joint responsibility.
There's one question before I hand over to Commissioner Finga regarding Cape Town and Free State, the ballot papers. The Free State, we received information about Harip, some ballot papers having, I don't know whether they were missing or something like that. We investigated that, and to the best of my ability, I'll ask the CEO if he has any information. Before I came here, I didn't receive any information on that. But Cape Town, in Cape Town yesterday, what happened is that some ballot papers were accidentally dropped off a van. They were found. Please, let's not be alarmist. We all recovered those ballot papers because, you see, our ballot papers have a serial number. They are packed in books of 100. Each book has a serial number, and also the counterfoil of each ballot paper has a serial number. So we are able to trace each ballot paper to each voting station. So we reported this matter to the Party Liaison Committee in Cape Town for transparency, because we have to inform parties of everything that happens. We quarantined all those ballot papers, meaning that we will not use them in this coming election. We've quarantined them, sealed them, put them aside. We will allocate out of our buffer stock new ballot papers for the voting stations concerned. So we have dealt with that, and we have even transmitted messages to our colleagues on the ground to take special care when they deliver ballot papers. You would know that in our country, people will, hire vehicles for this purpose that are not up to standard. So we have given a firm instruction that vehicles that transport ballots must be properly secured, and they also have to have, features that enable that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. I don't know about Harip. I'll ask Harip in the Free State, the CEO, to respond to that. and also Commissioner Finga on Strax Split.
It's working.
It's working. It's working.
Oh,
Can you come here?
I will stay. When you have 22,263 voting stations, you will hear a lot of things being said. But the story in Harib, it's actually not correct. We have checked with the province. There was a conversation being heard, and somebody unfortunately went to misrepresent that conversation. There were ballots being allocated by the person whom we call an area manager, and in the allocation of ballots, I'm told that there was a discussion that was being held about the quantities of the ballots that must be issued for this occasion, and it was understood by someone or misheard by someone to say there are ballots that are missing. We can report that there are no ballots that are missing, but we have 22,263 places, and thus far our plans have held well. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The chairperson has asked me to deal with the question about step split. I was working in the Eastern Cape yesterday and today, and I want to confirm that this morning we received a report of the hall that was torched in Stegspruit. Obviously, we panicked quite a bit because we thought that that hall was one of our venues. But on investigation, we found that it is actually not a venue for special votes. Can I just add that yesterday, when the ROC, the Results Center of the Eastern Cape, was launched, we had the head of the police in the province, the provincial commissioner, who assured us and assured the political parties that the volatile though Stegspruit is, she, as the head of the police in the Eastern Cape, has taken all measures to make sure that the voting in that area proceeds well. Assured political parties that were present that she is deploying her best personnel to the area to deal with the matter.
Thank you, commissioners. Looks like there are no burning hands in the audience.
Well, there's one question about the finger, the ink.
Indelible ink, yes.
It is indelible.
Yeah.
Mine is still there.
Mine.
Commissioner Fingers is there as well. Let me see it. And
Okay.
his is still there. So.
Bazukile, don't start. Don't start, Bazukile. We're running a serious elections here.
You took a picture of what?
Of us.
All right. Bazukile, let's take this offline. Let me, commissioners, let me take this.
No, we can't leave here without responding to this question.
To the wrapping
CEO,
off,
please
all right.
respond.
But, sorry, before the CEO responds, remember that when we're dealing with security measures around the ballot papers, as well as all measures that were taken to authenticate the ballot paper, ink is just but one aspect. You heard earlier on that for a ballot paper to be authentic, it's got to have a stamp indicating that that ballot paper is authentic. But in addition to that, when you come and register, rather to vote, your name is crossed on the voter's roll to make sure that you cannot actually come back and try to cast a vote. So we're putting many mechanisms in place. We're not just using one security measure to be able to deal with it. But I want the CEO then to deal with the issue that he wants to deal with.
Indelible ink.
Oh.
Deal with the ink.
I think the issue of ink comes election after election. And often people will go to voting stations and apply a lot of chemicals to their fingers and get us to have the ink. the ink is indeed indelible. Sometimes it will appear to fade until you put certain chemicals, after which it reacts. But being that as it may be, there are a number of measures in this election that we have put into place. Of course, the name of a voter appears once on the voters' roll. We use in every station that voters' roll with that name, with the single name of a voter at that point, in combination with the zip-zips. And there will be instances where any attempts to deal with voter fraud will be picked up, and we'll deal with that. There are quite a number of measures, and I think we are better off calling on all South Africans to do the right thing in this election and to vote only once.
It is a criminal.
It is a criminal offense to commit electoral fraud, and we need to warn voters accordingly.
Thank you very much. Let me wrap up this press briefing. Let me thank the media this afternoon. Tomorrow is the second and final day for special voting. Voting stations open at 9 o'clock, close at 5 p.m. Wednesday is the big day for the Commission. So therefore, let's go out and ensure that South Africans have got the right information as we gather to this afternoon. We'll continue conversing on various other issues that comes. Commissioners, let me take this moment, as well as the CEO, to thank your presence in this press briefing. Thank you very much.
How's it?
All right, thank you.
Good, man.
Good.
I'm from